Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Pavilion at COP-15, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lauren Small, and I'm the Director of the Canada Pavilion for Environment and Climate Change Canada. Bonjour à tous. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au Pavillon du Canada à la COP15 et merci de vous rejoindre à nous aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Lauren Small et je suis la directrice pour le Pavillon du Canada avec l'environnement et changement climatique Canada. Just before we start, if you could please ensure your phones are on mute, that would be very much appreciated. Donc, assurez que vos téléphones seront sur sourdine, ça serait apprécié. Il y a aussi de l'interprétation simultanée. Nicolas en arrière a des écouteurs. There is simultaneous translation if you need it in the back. Nicolas is seated there. And if you do have a headset, to please return it before you leave the room. And this session is also going to be recorded. Cette présentation sera enregistrée. C'est avec plaisir que je vous présente notre premier événement ce matin, Voix des rivières conservation sur la biodiversité, organisé par l'Observatoire international des droits de la nature. It's a pleasure for me to introduce our first event of the day, River Voices, Conversation on Biodiversity, hosted by the International Observatory for the Rights of Nature. This event will be hosted by Inés Benada, Vice President of the International Observatory for the Rights of Nature. Inés is a jurist and currently completing her articling to be a member of the Quebec Bar Association in Canada. She also works and collaborates for Harmonie with Nature chapter of the United Nations, recipient of the Lieutenant Governor of Canada Medal for Youth in 2017 for her remarkable commitment. Her actions during her academic career in the Aboriginal law, environmental law, and human rights committees shows her keen interest in the environmental cause. Please join me in welcoming Inés.
Bonjour à tous. Welcome everyone. You can hear me well? Perfect. Alors, je suis heureuse de vous accueillir ce matin au Pavillon du Canada à la COP15 à Montréal sur ce panel portant sur l'eau et la biodiversité.
Panel on water and biodiversity. Voice of the Rivers Conversation on Biodiversity, River Voices. So, at the hour of climate change and the loss of biodiversity, we will be put into conversation this morning different cases of legal rights for rivers and water streams. It's a strange topic for some. This notion of legal personality, how you can attribute this to natural entities, water ecosystems, river, water streams, to highlight their role in the protection of biodiversity. This will be the opportunity to dialogue and to create bridges between this river that bring us together, particularly the Mutehekau Magpie on the northern coast of Quebec, which is the first case of recognition of rights to a river in Quebec and in Canada as a whole. So I've already been unknown. I will be the moderator of this panel. So to start with, we will be seeing an extract from a documentary by André Desrochers that's called The Devil's Rapids, that was recently screened in Montreal. So that we look after our little corner of the country, particularly endowed with quantities of fresh water compared to the rest of the planet. We must care for the river where I flow and breathe to create a great blue community. Let's reappropriate the river and its shores. To hell with the cost. Water is life. Human development generates profit, certainly, but paradoxically, it constitutes the greatest threat to me, to the river, its resources, and the humans who coexist there. And why not make my river a legal entity? Not only would we continue to contribute to its biodiversity, to recognize water as a basic right for all our activities, but also as a true living milieu ecosystem to protect, starting with the tiniest organisms all the way up to you humans. Beyond rules and environmental legislations, the river in itself, its rapids, could become a truly legal individual. represented by guardians drawn from all walk of life to defend its very existence. Before we start, allow me to give you a small presentation of the International Observatory of the Rights of Nature. We are a NGO whose mission is to promote the rights of nature and their recognition, the legal recognition in Quebec, in Canada, and in the world. Scientific research, analysis, implementation of legal tools are our key aspects in order to promote discussions, legal level, among others. We work together with legal experts, with lawyers from all horizons in order to understand this legal change. So our first speaker, we have the huge honor to have Mariana Mercedes Sanchez, coordinator of the chapter Harmony with Nature of the UN. Maria Mercedes Sanchez has more than 20 years experience in sustainable development and intergovernmental process, including the engagement of commitment of great groups at all levels of implementation of different UN mandates. She's worked a lot in academia, reports, research, and communication. She's participated in 4 main conferences of the United Nations on sustainable development, 1992, 1997, 2012, and the preparation today of the 2030 agenda adopted by the UN Assembly in 2015. Ever since the Harmony with Nature program in 2009, she coordinates and directs the program to support the principles of Earth jurisprudence. So the program is meant to reinforce the interdisciplinary cooperation in favor of a vision of the world and governance system that would not be anthropocentric, so focused on the planet Earth, in which humans are only a small part of a much wider community. And at the heart of this world vision, there is the recognition of the right of nature and the relations between humanity and our own planet, which are symbiotic and interconnect. So without any further ado, Maria Mercedes, it's your turn now. Can you hear me? Yes? Sorry. I'm very happy to be here today. Very happy to be among you. There we go. Someone's fixing that bloody microphone. Perfect. Great. I am very happy to be with you here today. I'm very happy to share this morning with you today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I will be continuing my presentation in English, if you don't mind.
For many, the pandemic has been a wake-up call about the human-nature relationship. And as Indigenous peoples have been echoing for centuries, it has become more obvious than ever that the key to sustainability and to assuring a healthy planet lies in restoring humanity's broken relationship with the land and with nature as a whole. The adoption of rights of nature legislation has provided a plural, integrated vision of living in harmony with nature, and the body of Earth-centered law is transforming dominant legal traditions established in the Anthropocene and fundamentally informed by Western thought that separated humans from the natural world. Over the last decade, close to 40 countries have recognized the rights of nature. Through more than 200 enactments and cases, and the rights of nature are now recognized in a variety of legal systems, including those based on civil law tradition, mixed law, and common law. So far, the most significant recognition of the rights of nature has been achieved through the legislative channel, followed by the judiciary, then the executive, institutional assemblies, and indigenous tribal councils. Furthermore, the worldviews and cosmogonies of indigenous peoples have been recognized in constitutional and international law. There has been a widening of the categories of natural entities with recognized rights, from ecosystems to plants and non-human animals. Mountains, highlands, glaciers, peaks, and national parks have been recognized as legal persons. In some cases, nature as a whole is recognized, for example, by declaring the rights of Mother Earth when recognizing indigenous peoples' territories subjects of rights. Of particular note is the activity concerning aquatic ecosystems, with bodies of water such as rivers and their tributaries, seas, lakes, lagoons, natural springs, wetlands, and coral reefs being recognized as legal persons. For example, the recognition of the Odra River in Colombia in 2016, the Wanganui River in New Zealand in 2017, the Magpie River in Canada in 2021, and the Mar Menor in Spain in 2022 have all been recognized as living entities with whom humans have a complementary relationship rather than as objects to be exploited. Beyond the rights to engage in legal proceedings, each body of water has rights to the protection of their existence in their current state and restoration when the equilibrium is violated. They all responded to some present difficulty, including actual or potential environmental degradation. Moreover, the existing legal protection were inadequate to address the situation, leading to the adoption of a new ecocentric paradigm. Each case is further rooted in its own social and cultural context, and each emerged in different legal systems, ranging from systems of a Romano-Germanic law, like in Colombia and Spain, to common law, like is the case of New Zealand, and to a mixed law system, the case of Quebec. Hence, the bodies of water were granted rights through different means: a judicial decision for the Odra River, national legislation for the Wanganui, local resolutions for the Magpie, and citizen demand for legislation in the case of Mar Menor. In addition, a different level of protection was obtained in each case. These efforts to protect waterways by recognizing their rights have spurred other efforts. For example, here in Canada, this past May, 2 bills to grant the St. Lawrence River rights have been introduced, one in the federal parliament and one in the provincial legislature of Quebec. Both bills call for establishing the St. Lawrence River Protection Committee, which would act as a guardian of the river. As recent as this past September, the Spanish Parliament recognized the legal personhood of the Mar Menor and his basin, thus becoming the first ecosystem in Europe with rights. These examples build on the many legal acknowledgments of nature as a subject of rights recognized worldwide. Furthermore, the interdependence between human rights and rights of nature is increasingly recognized. For example, the ruling on the Odra River case denounces the violations of the plaintiff's right to live in a clean and ecologically balanced environment, as well as the right to water. Likewise, the resolutions on the Magpie River appeals to the rights of the people of Quebec to environmental protection as recognized in the Provincial Environment Quality Act. And the connection between the environment and human health was similarly emphasized in the proposed legislation in Mar Menor, which evoked prior rulings of the Supreme Court of Spain on the subject. At the Stockholm +50 held this past June, the inseparable connection between human rights and the rights of nature was reaffirmed within leadership dialogue on the theme Reflection on the Urgent Need for Actions to Achieve a Healthy Planet and Prosperity for All. The leadership dialogue's first recommendation recognized urgent calls for governments to protect and promote both human rights and the rights of nature. This past October, at the 41st Congress of the International Federation for Human Rights, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the organization, a key outcome of the Congress was the adoption of the Resolution for the Rights of Nature and their interdependence with human rights. The Federation was created after First World War in 1922 by the Human Rights Association of Spain, France, and 13 other associations. The Federation was closely involved in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. The leadership role that civil society organizations have and continue to play in advancing the rights of nature must be commended. They often initiate the process of drafting proposed legislation, which is then taken up by a political official or party and adopted by a legislative body in the form that the body deems appropriate. In this regard, the role played by the International Observatory for the Rights of Nature has been instrumental in working closely with local communities and indigenous nations in the drafting of the legislation recognizing the rights of the Magpie River. Furthermore, the observatory has been actively engaged in the process of introducing parallel bills regarding the St. Lawrence Bill of Rights. Another trend has been the rising number of rights of nature enactments, building, for example, on the corpus of international legislation, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the Paris Agreement, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. For example, on the occasion of the 9th session of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the methodological assessment regarding the diverse conceptualization of multiple values of nature, approved this past July in Bonn, highlights that to share a vision of prosperity for people and the planet, reflected by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the 2050 Vision for Biodiversity, depends on system-wide transformative change that incorporates the diverse values of nature and is aligned with the mutually supportive goals of justice and sustainability and their intertwined economic, social, and environmental dimensions. To conclude, I would like to express my gratitude to the International Observatory for the Rights of Nature for its continued collaboration with the UN Harmony with Nature program, as well as to all the speakers with whom I'm honored to share this event today. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, merci Mercedes. Alors, je vous présente maintenant ma collègue Yenny Verga Cardenas, présidente de l'Observatoire international des droits de la nature. Membre experte du réseau Harmonie avec la nature de l'ONU et rapporteur spécial du projet de recherche mené par le Max Planck Institute sur les droits de la nature, décolonisation et pluralisme juridique, Yenny est avocate au Canada et en Colombie. Elle possède un master en droit des affaires et un doctorat de l'eau en droit et gouvernance d'une université canadienne. Elle est spécialiste en gestion des eaux transfrontalières en droit international. Elle est également impliquée dans la reconnaissance des droits et de la personnalité juridique de la rivière Magpie, une première dans l'histoire du Québec et du Canada, on le rappelle. Et à travers l'Observatoire international des droits de la nature, elle milite aussi pour la reconnaissance de la personnalité juridique du fleuve Saint-Laurent. Yenny, je te laisse la parole.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien? Merci beaucoup d'être là aujourd'hui. Ce samedi, on approche à la fin de la COP et puis c'est vraiment un moment important pour les négociations. Et j'espère qu'aujourd'hui, ça va vraiment se décider pour la nature parce que finalement, nous aussi, on fait partie de la nature. Et oui, effectivement, j'ai fait un...
Yes, indeed. No, I'm good. I did a PhD on the rights of water. I used to write the term water everywhere. I was trying to find synonyms. So my topic, I tried to find other words like resources, renewable resource, and finally it was between water and resources. But today I realized that we are really in the Anthropocenic era, the age of the Anthropocene. Well, we thought that water was just a resource, a tool to achieve an objective. Today, our technical resources help us to transmit and to communicate. Water would just be one resource among others. But it's only by thinking further that I realized that water was far more than that it's actually an ecosystem, not just for us, but for all life forms. And that the question of sustainable sustainable development, the world development. I didn't know what we meant by development. When we look at Amazonas, when we see the the Arctic regions, now South Pole and the North Pole. What does development mean? And development was becoming synonymous with destruction. And sustainable, that just means we're not going to destroy everything. So I started to wonder, and this is where I arrive in a moment where I discovered the Summa Causai. This is a new concept in Ecuador that has been inscribed into the constitution, and in other concepts that have been formulated by legal entities that speak about ecocentrism. We're saying with the age of the Anthropocene that we now need to move towards the age of ecocentrism, where we recognize that we are part of nature, that nature should have a dignity just like we have an intrinsic dignity. Nature, the river, the waterways also have a dignity.
You heard that the Minister of Development of Quebec declared new species that are vulnerable, at risk, or endangered. So this means that the species will be protected much more, but it also shows that when we take stock of what we did as a society, it's not very good. So the idea today in this COP is to stop fighting the earth, and now we should start changing things really. And to change things, it's really to change the paradigm. If we want to change the paradigm, that is why that we need to recognize the rights of nature in this framework for biodiversity post 2020, and that's why the rights of nature is still in question. It hasn't been reached a consensus to include them. We talk about the right of the Mother Earth and the right of nature, and indeed we are in a theory of change, change of paradigm, and we really hope that they will be able to decide and really include the rights of nature, because this paradigm has been in existence for already a long time, and the global framework will be for at least 10 years, so it needs to be updated. This river has a legal personality. It was a negotiation between Maoris and the government, and the river received a legal personality in a few years ago, and I wanted to know what is the point really. And we heard the High Court in India giving a ruling and declaring the Ganga River as a subject of rights. So for us in as human beings, we always need to act as if the river were a child in its best interest. So the river being the subject of rights is very important for me. So it's not really, it's not enough to just protect and say that there might be violations of the rights of the river, but the river must be totally protected just as human beings. So the i- everybody goes and swims in the river. So if the river is polluted, it's really important, and the watershed is very huge. And since that time, the government has allocated funds in order to achieve that. Now we also have other cases in Bangladesh, and for the European ecosystem. So we are going to talk about the other speaker later. We're going to introduce also the Saint Laurent Alliance. It's an association with First Nation, the Federation of Quebec, etc., in order to write the legal entity, personality in the law. And Alexander is today in our panel. The Québec Solidaire is also uh, here. We had elections, so that we need now to have new laws. And the government announced yesterday there would be a new law about water. So please ask now the introduction of a legal entity for nature. If we don't do it now for the rivers, really it's going to be too late in years. So it's the ideal moment, and please do it now. Thank you. We understood the basis of this change in paradigm, and also the Saint Laurent Alliance that gathers multi partners supporting the Saint Laurent River. Now I would like to introduce Chalice Molen Picard. She is a leader of the community of Komnichit. And Shani, would you like to come and say a few words about your community?
Oui, Shanice Molen-Picard, dernier gadron, no Japan et Guanji. Salut, mon nom c'est Shanice Molen-Picard. Okay.
I am Shani Smolen Picard. Good morning. I introduced myself in Innu Imun. It's my mother tongue, and I didn't expect to speak this morning. I'm part of the Modeko Shipu Alliance, and we started in 2018. It's work with regional consensus, and we have a council in my community, and there are other actors involved. For example, the IORN and the association Mangigani is also part of our alliance. So to have the river recognized as a legal entity means that it will be protected for the future generation. I would like my son to be able to drink the water from this river. I would like him to see also the mountains and the land that is favorable to caribou. Caribou is very respected in our nation, and he's a symbol of very many things. And we also fight against the hydroelectric power station in on this river, because we have a problem with all these hydroelectric dams. I believe that it's possible to produce green energy in different ways. So we already lost a sister river, and we don't want to lose the Magpie River now. So we would like to have a protected area, and it should be an indigenous protected area. And so I really want to have a concrete action to protect this river. If you have any question, please ask. Thank you, Shani. I want to say that for the Innu community, the Magpie or Mutehekau is really like a sister taking care of the ancestors' voice, and rivers are sacred living entities that are interconnected with the rest of the systems. So I would like to say that the voice of Saint Laurent River was heard by politicians. Our panelist Alexander Boris is fighting against social injustices, and he's been doing it for 10 years or more. He was speaking about environment and the rights of workers. So, Alexander, you've got the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ines. Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you today to talk about this very important topic. We spoke a lot because of the climate change crisis. We talked about it as a crisis of loss of biodiversity. And there are people who recognize that it was the same crisis, that it was sub-crisis emerging from the impact of human activity on the planet. Human beings in their most Western and capitalist vision takes the place of ecosystems and destroys the ways of lives that would allow us to have a harmonious relation with nature. Because of our mining history, we use more resources from the planet than the planet can regenerate. So it's like you being in your house and you eat uh, more things from your fridge than what you can buy to put in the fridge. So at some point there will be nothing in the fridge. So we talk about the extinction that could be the sixth wave of extinction that the planet has experienced. Other waves took tens of thousands of years, but because of our impact and the pollution of the environment, our overconsumption way of life, we are in the process of having the sixth wave, but we also accelerate it. There are species that disappear from the planet, and it's more than we have ever seen. It's not just only species disappearing. We know that maybe half of the mammals disappeared in the last 300 years, but it was the same also for insects, but for those who are still around, there was a study in 2016, and it shows that 60% of the biomass of more than 30 species followed over 40 years have disappeared. That is to say, the total weight of the species living on the planet is really decreasing sharply. So we really have to change our way of life, our economic model, our legal model as well. For the economic model, we cannot go on in the same way. We often give this example. idea of growth, economic growth, and GDP. You take a forest, you remove all the trees, and you put a mall and a parking for the cars, and you have increased the GDP, and it is seen as growth, while in reality it's a disaster. So we need to change the way of thinking. Someone was saying that someone who believed that we could grow without limit on a limited planet is either a fool or an economist. And these people are seen as serious, these economists, but it's not serious, it's irresponsible. There are good things in our economic model, but it's not enough. We are talking about giving everybody a healthy environment, and I want this for my family. I want them to be able to breathe and walk around and not become sick. But again, as Yanni said, it's an anthropocentric vision. We give rights to human beings. Maybe we should also give rights to nature, and that's how we would be able to change the legal framework with rights and legal personality to nature elements. So in 2009 we talked, and in 2020 I made a proposal in this sense, and it was done last spring. It was the first time in Northern America, and it was done the same day at the assembly. Now we have also the monitoring council for the Saint Laurent River, because the Saint Laurent River comes from the Great Lakes, and we need also to have a First Nation from Ontario and Quebec in the council. We also need environmental organization and civil society organization, and they must be in the majority as opposed to the members from the government. They would be also the guardians of the river. There would be also awareness raising work done about something also about the knowledge of the river. And all this should have a representation in the media, also representation at the court, in order to protect the species that are threatened in the Saint Laurent River. There is the Chevalier cuivré existing only in the Saint Laurent River. So if this fish disappears, it disappears from the whole world. And now, we have a website. It's solutionsaintlaurent.ca, and I also go around the country in order to speak to people and to give information and to discuss this big conversation, and to make sure that we will be as successful as Mar Menor in Spain. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander, to have told us about your political experience and how it's possible to have such a national change like the bill for 2072. We now are lucky to tell you about the first case of recognizing the rights of nature in Europe, El Mar Menor. It's important work that our next speaker has done. The professor from Murcia University, Maria Teresa Vicente, is a teacher in philosophy of law, and she also has the chair for the rights of men and the rights of nature. She taught law for a long time, and she did research on ecological justice, the right of children, and from 2019 there was a group of activists, and with them they promoted the Mar Menor legal entity personality. So the initiative became law on the 30th of September this year. So, Teresa, I will give you the floor now. Thank you.
Perfect, but it's better than in French. Okay, I want to say you thank you, and also thank you all my partner, because they give me the possibility to tell you a big history in a short time, because some of the context that I need, they explain you very well at the moment. Then the question is that we are in a big revolution, a passive revolution, but the revolution most important in our century, because we have a big problem. Then when people have a big problem, all people around the world, then our feeling, our reason have the possibility to jump to a new paradigm. And then the new paradigm is ecocentric paradigm. Why? Because in the last century, we have a social revolution. We get a right for human, all human, woman, man, children, indigenous people, inequality, in theory. And in all the constitution, after Second World, is the social justice and social right. Okay, that's a good revolution for the last century, but now we have a new problem. The biggest problem that the humanity have been in all the history, that is that our house, our planet is in danger. And we know that, I mean, from the last century, then we try to change, but we didn't change enough to solve the problem. United Nations just began in the last century, 40 years ago, big conference where all the country and all the scientific and the civil society put on the table our problem and try to get a solution. But every time, every year, when we go to a new conference or a COP, like a few last months in Egypt with the COP-27, or here in Canada with COP-15 about biodiversity, and then before COP we study the conclusion, all the best scientific around the world, and then they told us that we are worse, worse, and worse. Then we must think where is the root of the problem. And then for the first time, United Nations say that the big problem is the economic system. Because when we have the social justice problem, then we thought, okay, we can solve this problem into the capitalism. Okay, we try to do that, and then we have a welfare state, a social state. But it's not working to solve the planet, because the planet is the center of the life. 2 centuries ago, what it was the human revolution, I mean, when began human rights, then say, okay, personality, Jewish personality is just for a group of persons, white, people with money, also man, but company. Company have Jewish personality and have right to create a model that you can get everything for the nature and very quickly. Okay. And then after the Odra revolution, that some people, like women, like workers, like children, say, what happened with us? We are human, and we haven't Jewish personality. We haven't right by themselves focus in our value. Then, like I told you, we get another social revolution, but into the same economic system. But then now it's a contradiction to know that the nature is the center of the life, that the humanity is just one part of the nature, and that our way of life have one impact into the ecosystem that can be on the harmony with the ecosystem that let live all the biodiversity together. And then we need to know this reality. The indigenous people, they are our big teacher, but also in Occident, in our culture, the ecology is a new science that is coming in the last century. And then the ecologic science say, you are wrong. You are part of the nature. The humanity can live without nature. And it's not a just way that still that nature is one object and they can have a right. Why? Why a bank can have right and ecosystem no? I'm a lawyer for a long time, from I was 23 years old, and now I'm teaching in the university, and I choose the part into the law that is where is the justice. Because justice is not only for lawyer, it's for economy, and it's for all people that rethinking what happened and can open another possibility. But the possibility to give right to the nature, to the ecosystem, is coming from people around the world. In the report about harmony with nature, every year take the information how many countries give right to ecosystem, and all the time is coming from people. Because also now, last COP in Egypt, we try that the COP recognize right of nature. But in Egypt, I have been there, and some of us also, but in the COP, it was only market. But the nature is out of market, because nature gives us all free. One good example is that in Somerset, I like go to the sea, because it was very confused all the time in the COP, and also indigenous people that they were try to speak about right of nature. Then when we try go to the sea, the police come with us. What happened? You can't go to swim. Why no? You must pay. We must pay. to go to the swing. This is one good example. And then at the end, we get some question out of market. At what happened here? Here, we are trying that in the Biodiversity Convention, take the language of people, the language of national, the unit nation in the General Assembly, but now it's in bracket, still in bracket. But then I have 1 minute, I think, to tell the history, what happened with Mar Menor. Why people that didn't know nothing about law, about that it's impossible to change the model when we have a new problem, that we can move in another economic system. Why we get right for Mar Menor in 1 year? And then the history is because people was around Mar Menor. Mar Menor, for us, is our identity. Is the most important thing that we have. All people have been in love in Mar Menor, have begun to dance near Mar Menor. Mar Menor for all people is to be sure that they can be healthy the next year. And then in 2019, the fish, the life of Mar Menor, jumped to kill themselves just in front of our eyes. Then people wake up in an ecological conscience, in an ecological ethic, and then began to ask for the first time to our politic and scientific what happened with Mar Menor. Why you lies? Why you say that no problem with our model of economic? Why explain us? And then in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night, people were in the square to ask. And then I was there because in 2019 I was in Reading University in the Center of Justice and Ecology, just studied the case that my partner told you, Wangani River, Atrato River, how they get right for this ecosystem. And then my students say, teacher, we can give one study to get Mar Menor. Then I went there and with a lot of teachers and politics and say, we are studying the way to give right to Mar Menor into our law. And then in this moment, people say, we want it. And then the law is a popular initiative that in our constitution say that a new law can come from parliamentary politics, from the government, and from people. And then we get this idea, and it's the first time that this is working in all our democracy in the plenty sense. We get all the party on the left, on the center, on the right, only 3 say no. And then we get it in the time that our constitution and our organic law let the people to do that. And then this is a victory that is coming from people, like indigenous people are fighting for the right of nature because they know that the nature is the life. And we are part. And then when the scientific or some lawyers say, the nature have rights, then people know that. People know, yeah, because we have a law that let us take a new idea that is good for everybody, but because this law it's a big process, you know. You must go to the commission in Madrid, in the parliament, then another commission, then all the plenty, then Senado. But in every step, we win, we win. A lot of difficult, I haven't time, but the truth is that the secret of this victory is one revolutionary idea that is working in a context that is prepared to get it. And then this idea is coming from a public university. And then people was ready to get it, is the second part, people. And the third part is the politic. In this moment, the politic listen the people. And then we finish with, I think it's not only a big victory for our country, and also we are into a big movement around the world, is a victory for the art, because the art is a way to understand a question that is difficult for politics and also for the statement. And then I can say thank you to all artists that have been with us to explain people what we try to explain in our legal language. And I would like to say you that just when 3 months, it's just the time to finish, anybody asks us, what is right for nature? All the time say, we want sign to get right for Mar Menor. Then now, thank you to people to open our mind, because we haven't time to wait another COP, another bracket, no bracket, yes bracket. No, we are prepared to have a jump to a new justice, ecological justice model that means a change in the economy, in the politics, and in the way to understand the life. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Teresa.
So now that Mar Menor has rights, there's similar cases in Europe are progressing, similar because the river is also suffering. I would like to introduce you to talk about this more in detail. Piotr Niniansky, he's our next speaker. Piotr, he's an expert in the development and implementing of nature conservation measures, particularly protection of freshwater resources. So the natural processes, and also protection and restoration of endangered species and habitats. He's the co-founder of the WWF Poland, where he was in charge of long-term action strategy on natural conservation and environmental policy. He's also co-initiator of the Time for Water Coalition and the Save the Rivers Coalition and the Code for Green program. He's actually an independent expert. He's a founder of the advice company, counseling company Terra. He's also advisor of for the Poland WWF Foundation and the Social Initiative Forum.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting panel and for this discussion, having these river voices present on the COP-15. Sometimes, as you know, one picture is worth more than 1,000 words. That is why I begin with this picture, which is showing in the very short way how does the condition, the ecological condition of European rivers looks like. This map of Europe, which was prepared thanks to the data from the European Environmental Agency shows the percentage of the rivers which are in the bad ecological condition. All the red colors you can see, especially in the western and middle part of Europe, is showing that only 5–10% of the rivers are still in the good ecological condition. For the Europe, about 40% of the rivers are still semi-natural or natural, but over 60% are changed in the drastic way, I must say, which means that the chemical, physical, biological parameters are not natural anymore. And this is a very sad picture of what we have done with the rivers in Europe, but also all over the world. Let's focus on one example. You can see, you can recognize on the map the green color there. This is the international catchment of Odra River. This is Czech, Polish, German river, about 900 kilometer long river, which is in theory very well protected. About 70% of the river valley is included in Natura 2000 system. This is the European system for protected areas. And the river valley is still very unique in Europe because we have a presence of the very healthy riparian forest, oxbows and wet meadows. And this is really unique for Europe. Only the upper part of the Odra River has been channelized with 23 dams, but we still have over 500 kilometers of free-flowing river. But parallelly, we have unfortunately very long time, very dominant economic treatment and exploitation of the river. I'm talking about fragmentation of the river, about the pollution, about using the river for the transportation as a waterway, about using the river for production of energy. Parallelly, there were no program for revitalization or restoration of the river valleys and the river itself. So that's a very sad picture, but I must say the river sometimes is treated as a cheap way to dismiss sewage water or post-industrial water. In case on many European rivers, the waters from mining industry, like coal mining, is just pumped in to the rivers. I have to admit that those are very salty, salty waters with a huge amount of salinity. And what was happened this year, exactly a few months ago, summer this year, this is a result of very slow process of reconstruction or revitalization of the rivers. The Water Framework Directive, which is obliged for all European countries, doesn't work or work too slowly. In the result, this summer we have got very high temperature, very low water levels, almost in all European rivers. And this is a typical, and it can be in the future the case connected with the climate change. It can happen everywhere. But on the same time, we have pumped into the water the same amount of sewage water and the post-industrial water, especially the water with the high salinity. Just imagine that in summer this year, the fresh water, the Odra River, has got the level of salinity comparable to the Atlantic Ocean, the river, the freshwater river, what was happened? We've got the alga bloom, so-called golden alga bloom, and the toxin released by the algae has killed the life, biological life, on the stretch about 500 kilometers of the river. Just imagine that in few days, it was happening in 2 weeks. We've got collected the dead fishes' bodies along from the river surface, from the river banks, along the 500 kilometers of the river. And I must say it was a huge civil society action. The citizens has reacted in the very proper way. Although many people were just standing on the river banks, and it was like a helpless situation. They didn't know what to do and how to react. They didn't get the support from the governmental agencies for 2 weeks. And this example, what was happened on the Odra River this year, summer this time, we think it can happen everywhere in the world. Everywhere where the technical and economical treatment of the rivers are not parallelly connected with the restoration or revitalization work for the river or river valleys. This is a very sad example, but I think is a good example to show that we immediately need really a paradigm shift and a new attitude, how to see the river, how to work with the river, how to live on the river and on the river banks. I must say we have created a huge movement, a coalition of over 40 NGOs working together now to save the rivers. That's Save the River Coalition. We have created international coalition, Polish, Czech, German one, Time for Odra, to protect the rivers, which invited the scientists, just people who want to help, and the organizations. And we think, and I'm talking in name of the coalition Save the Rivers, that giving the legal personality for rivers is the right answer to this situation. And I have to admit that we get inspired thanks to Yenny work and thanks to Rita, who show me and us the example of Magpie River in Canada. We have visiting this area, and I hope it can help us to help the rivers in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr. Alors, nous avons pu, grâce à ton partage d'expérience, en apprendre plus sur cette initiative que vous menez en Pologne avec la rivière Odra. C'est ce qui complète notre panel sur les voix des rivières, conversation sur la biodiversité. Voice of Rivers, Conversation on Biodiversity. Comme vous avez pu le constater ce matin avec nous, on a présenté plusieurs cas. Les cas de la rivière Mutehekau, shipu, Magpie, le fleuve Saint-Laurent, la Mar Menor et la rivière Odra. Donc, les voix des rivières sont présentes tout autour du monde et elles se font entendre grâce à la reconnaissance de leurs droits par la personnalité juridique. Les Nations unies reconnaissent même l'importance d'une telle démarche avec le chapitre Harmonie avec la nature. C'est un moyen légal de préserver la biodiversité. Nous allons continuer évidemment la discussion avec vous, si vous avez des questions aussi, en dehors de l'espace suite à l'événement. Et avant de conclure, Yenny, est-ce que tu souhaiterais dire un mot de la fin?
Oui, je ne sais pas si, on aurait un peu quelques minutes pour les questions. Si
bon.
jamais
On peut les prendre ici
vous
aussi.
voulez,
Là, je vois qu'il nous reste 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Ouais. On peut faire ça aussi.
Donc, si jamais il y a quelqu'un qui aimerait poser une question.
Sentez-vous bien à l'aise. Il y a un micro juste là.
Sinon, on le fait dans un cadre informel.
Oui, ça peut être ça
vous
aussi.
voulez.
Non. Ah, c'est une question.
Hello. I just wanted to ask, so who represents...
Excuse-moi de t'interrompre. Can you... Yeah.
Yeah.
Move better this way. Thank you.
Who represents the rivers and how are these people or panels chosen?
Can you repeat the question? I think it was not enough.
Who represents the rivers and how are these people or panels chosen?
Thank you for your question.
Can you hear me? We are in this point in Spain because we have the law, and in the law is very easy to read. Also now is translated in English. It's just 7 articles. And then in the article you say in the first one that the river have juris personality. The second one is the right of the river, that is similar in all the ecosystem. It's like magic because we didn't know one another, but it's the same. And then the right to live, to development, to repair. Then the article, the 3 article, number 3 is what you are asking. Who is the tutor or the representation of the right to the river? And then 4, 6, and 7 is the other part of the representation of the ecosystem, that who can be the river. And then everybody can be the river because we are part of the river. And then now, because our law is working, every woman, every man in Spain and also in another country can defend the right of the river. Is the name in the law language is juris action. And then you can ask to the government or just go to the tribunal. But the question that you are in concrete asking is the tutor of the river. And then is 3 committees. One committee is the guardian of the river. Then the guardian of the river are every town in the basin of the lagoon must choose 1 person. And then the mayor choose 1 person. And also all the community, economic, social, in all the activity around the lagoon, also organization about women, about young people, about economic, also intensive agriculture and ecological agriculture, all that choose 1 guardian. And then all together, we are the guardian. In the law, you can see the number. All the time is the people is more. We are more than the politic because we try to solve the problem that why, if Mar Menor have a lot of protection, why this is happen? Why the politic don't look for the law? And then this is the guardian committee. Then is the scientific committee. Then all the university that at the moment have a study about what need Mar Menor and what is the problem with Mar Menor, they choose also one person to be in the scientific committee. But this committee is open to another university, like if you are ill and in your hospital is not the best specialist, you can go to another country. And then the third committee is the representation, and then is the government, the central government, one person in Spain, the local, and finished. The local, one person, and also the promoter community, I mean the citizen, 7 persons. Then in 3 committee, autonomic, but working together, and in every committee, people is more than politics and administration.
Thank you, Teresa, for your answer. I think we'll have time for... Okay. Oh, 2 more questions. So we'll split in 1 more? Okay. Oh. In this case, we will continue the discussion, of course, after in the event space. Okay, go.
Kwe, thank you for the panel. I really love how it ventured into also Europe, because a lot of the indigenous-led river protection were put forward a lot, but to see it applied in European settings, also the project of having this the connected river protecting committee, that is something that I've seen coming forward, and it's born of indigenous knowledge. What I wanted to share very fast is that today we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Idle No More movement, and it was put forward because of the Harper era, where they were taking off some of the oldest protective laws in Canada over river, and we were wondering why, and it was because of pipelines, to facilitate pipelines passing, so it's connected. But why I wanted to share is that there's one knowledge that's very important that I missed to hear today, and it comes from a lot of the indigenous perspective that is put in these places, and it's the connection to water. I hear it, but I don't hear how basic it is. And that's why I wanted to share one teaching that I am obligated to share, because it's at the base of everything we're doing, even in my movement. And it's the connection of women and water, and men and water. And what is happening is that we don't see, like, from my children to me, to my mother, to my grandmother, we are connected by one river, which is the umbilical cord. And it brings us back to the basic of it all, which is the water on earth. And often men feel disconnected, but I said, you're the little fishes inside that river. And we saw those fishes die in that river. So we are guardians of water, and that's one of the indigenous role we hold as women, is to guard that water, because we are the river that continues on in time, from my daughter to my granddaughter up to 7 future generations. So I don't hear as much the power of women and that re-equilibration of the roles that is combined. It's not one over the other. It's not men over women and women over men. But that connection through our bodies, through our real life connection, is not as put forward. We talk about law, we talk about committees, we talk about action, political, but that basic connection, when you were saying people were standing next to the river and they didn't know what to do, that's the disconnect. So I was wondering if sometimes in other perspective, European perspective, because I come from the Innu community of Equanchit, so I'm basically very attached to the shipu too. Is there a regard for that connection that I hear is more or less put aside to normalize the importance of laws and political and the economy? That message I hear very well, but that basic human connection, do we hear it as much in Europe? Thank you for letting me put the standards why I was asking this question.
Thanks. I think Piotr have an answer.
It's maybe not the answer, is a big thank you for raising this exactly point about connection with the water. My comment is very shortly. I think that the administration and politics are disconnected with the water, and the people are still connected very well. And what has happened on Odra River, it shows that the people has reacted on the first way. They were trying to help, not the administration. And I still remember where I met Rita on Magpie River in your region, and I was explaining about the ecological disaster on the Odra River. It was in September this year, and Rita told me all rivers all over the world are connected, and we are connected with the river, we people. Thank you.
Alors, au nom de toute l'équipe de l'Observatoire Oh, on n'aura pas le temps, je pense, pour la dernière question.
We won't have time for the last question, so I invite you to continue the conversation outside of the pavilion. As I mentioned, there is a buffet. In the name of the International Observatory of Rights of Nature, I would like to thank you, and I say, let's meet soon again.